Welcome to Huddersfield Town's preview show in association with Sportsbroker ahead of this weekend's game against Wycombe Wanderers. To help us have a look at the game, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Stephen Chicken from the Huddersfield Examiner, former Town goalkeeper and BBC radio lead summariser Matt Glennon, and broadcaster Phil Catchpole, who also presents the Ringing the Blues podcast on Wycombe Wanderers. How are you all? You okay?
All good.
All good. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. No problem at all. Steve, I'm going to address the elephant in the room first of all. Where's the beard gone?
Yeah, it was an ill-advised decision I took earlier this week and immediately regretted. So
we've all been there. We've all been there, Steve. We've all been there.
Yeah, I do it about once every 5 years just to see what's going on under there. My wife's reaction was to stare at me for a few seconds and then go, "You look weird. Why have you done that?" So that's nice.
To be fair, it took absolute seconds off you.
On to football, Phil. Wycombe Wanderers. It's been a difficult. Life's been difficult, hasn't it, in the second tier of English football? So talk us through how the season's gone from your perspective.
Yeah, it's difficult on one hand, but also, I think we're incredibly fortunate to be in the Championship this season. I mean, they deserve to be there. They got promoted by right, but with COVID, the money that Wycombe are now making through the extra TV revenue in the Championship, I think has probably sorted the club out, financially for a good few seasons. So that from that point of view, it's good. So that's kind of I kind of likened our season to being on bullseye. We've got to the final. And, when they wheel out the speedboat at the end and, you get to do 101 or more with 6 darts, but if you go for it and you don't get it, you lose everything. We're kind of like going for the speedboat, but we're not going to lose our prizes, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because that's all safe. That's kind of how I looked at this season. And at the moment, it looks like we won't need the speedboat. So, yeah.
Ended up with a kitchen or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's always when you win the prize, it's never exciting. But yeah, it's been a hard season, especially in the winter, because the Brentford 7-2 game was a bit of a sharpener for many fans to kind of go, wow, this is pretty hard. But that was always a fixture that we feared. We lost 5-0 at Blackburn on the first away trip of the season. And they didn't win for 7 games at the start. So, it's been tough, but I think we always knew it was going to be. And we haven't thrown money at this. I think it's the smallest Championship budget in history, certainly in the modern era of the game, sort of post-Premier League. So, I know it's not about money but it does obviously have an impact. So it was always going to be a big stretch. And, they found the jump up in quality so far has been too great. Our chairman's just emailed the season ticket holders this morning saying that he still fully expects us to stay up. So whatever he has in his coffee every morning, I want 2 of them.
I was going to say, so, has there been games this season there where you really felt you are competing and we do deserve to be in this league? Has there been, a string of games like that?
Yeah, even like during the first 7 games of the Blackburn game aside, you could see like week on week in those defeats, they were really learning. And Gareth, the manager, said that he would need a couple of months to get his head around the Championship. And, after about 5 or 6 games, you could tell that the penny had dropped a bit and they were starting to kind of get their identity back and not be overawed. And they've really, for the vast majority of the games in the Championships, they've really been competitive and they've not been beaten off the park. And they've played some pretty big teams. We drew 0-0 with Watford at home and should have won that day. And Watford had players that are earning God knows what, and Wycombe, and they'd only paid money for players in the summer, like 2 players. That's the first time they'd paid money for players in 10 years. So it kind of showed you the gulf, but they really work hard and they run through brick walls for the manager, which is an old cliche, but it kind of made sure that they were competing. And it's just that lack of quality. They were creating chances, not very many, but when they did come, they weren't taking them. And then they'll make a mistake at the back. And in League One, you could probably get away with 2 or 3 in an average week. In the Championship, you make one mistake, bang, you're 1-0 down, you're chasing the game, and it's always really difficult. But they've been very competitive. I mean, as I mentioned the budget, I won't mention the budget anymore after this, I promise. But you know, the golf-in money, they should by rights be getting beat 4-5-0 every week, but they're not. And I think that's testament to the manager.
We saw, Steve, didn't we, how competitive Wycombe were when we went to Adams Park earlier this year. I mean, it wasn't the most enthralling game ever. It was more of a physical battle, wasn't it?
Yeah, one of the rare 0-0 draws Town have had this season. And, you know, we've had a couple of games like that. I think we've seen that Town do struggle a little bit against teams who play that low block, particularly away from home. They've had draws typically away from home against the teams that are below them in the table as well, although they've tended to win at home, which is encouraging going into this game. But, you know, as Phil's talked about, Wycombe are there for a reason. They earned their promotion last season, and Gareth Ainsworth has got a very limited squad doing the most they can with the resources available. So, you know, they're obviously bottom of the table. They're quite a long way adrift at this stage, and it's not looking fantastic. But at the same time, they are in the division on merit, and they're not going to make it easy for Huddersfield Town.
What do you remember from that game earlier this year, Matt, apart from being freezing cold, obviously?
Not being able to see the corner flag, so just guessing what was going on from where me and Oggy was sat. But no, I remember, obviously, I've played against Akinfenwa myself. He is a handful. I just thought there was too much about him on the actual pitch. I remember Christopher Schindler got himself injured because he tried to come over the top of him. You know what I mean? You don't push that lad out of the way. It's like trying to push the team bus, you know what I mean, back to Huddersfield. You know what I mean? He does his job. He does it very well. You know what I mean? I think if, you know what I mean, this game on Saturday, I think it'll be totally different. Totally different. You could see what Wycombe wanted to do over there. Town weren't brilliant, but you take a 0-0 anywhere away from home, win your home games, like they say, you know, and didn't concede. There was a couple little chances in there. It wasn't enthralling, like we said. But I just feel it's going to be a totally different game, and the pressure's on massively tomorrow, and I think they'll respond to it. I'm looking forward to it because, you know, I mean, we've seen with the Bristol game, other games building up. They're building up to scoring a few goals. You can see the building up to scoring a few goals, and you know, obviously Phil's still on the online with us, but I'm hoping tomorrow, you know what I mean, that bucket full of goals and, you know what I mean, that clean sheet and that real good feeling comes back, and I think it has to be tomorrow, to tell you the truth.
You mentioned the pressure there. Obviously, we're still looking for our first win of 2021. We've had a number of games where we've had loads of chances and just not been able to get that winner. Like you said, do you just feel, Matt, being at the games, that it is coming? Yeah,
I do. Yeah, you can usually sense when a team's battered, when they're beat, when they're finished. You know what I mean? You can sense it, and you know that the confidence is shattered. You don't feel that, as I say, watching the Bristol game. Stoke, like Phil will know, of a very expensive team with players who earn lots of money. Yes, they went down to 10 men, but 10 men behind the ball to still create 4 or 5 clear-cut chances shows that they're still going for it. They're still trying to win football matches, score goals. So, you know what I mean? I'm not getting they're not going to get the first win. It's going to keep going and going, because I've been in the game long enough playing and doing this job to know it doesn't carry on forever. You know, when you have got quality in the building and a coach who does know how to win football matches. So I'm just hoping tomorrow's the turning point, and then you got a Borough, you know what I mean, Tuesday night, and you kick on from there.
The fans are expecting it, aren't they, Steve? They're expecting a win from this game because of Wycombe's situation of being bottom of the table. But there also is a sense of a bit of nervousness, isn't there, around there?
Yeah, I think the thing about the low blocks that I mentioned is obviously worrying a few people. Town have struggled against sort of teams that have come to the John Smith Stadium and set up their shape and sort of, you know, stayed organised. But to be fair, that is a little bit of an outdated perception. You know, that there were the games last year against sort of Wycombe and Luton where that happened. But then this season, we've seen teams come and try and play that way. And the teams that are sort of in mid-table that play that style, likes of Preston and Stoke and Millwall, have been able to get results. But as I mentioned, the teams that are sort of below Town that try and play that way, Town have actually found a way to get past them on their own turf.
And Sheffield Wednesdays and things like that. Those
yeah,
games.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So there are reasons to be hopeful there, and it was interesting looking at this poor run of form sort of through that lens, because it's those, as I say, it's weirdly Town are really good against the teams towards the top of the table, the top 8, and they're good against the teams towards the bottom of the table, and it's that middle block that they're really struggling against, and it's those teams that it's 4 of them are the teams that Town have just played. It's Millwall, Bristol City, Stoke, Luton, are the teams that Town have especially struggled against. So this game is different to that, obviously, because of Wycombe's league position. The style doesn't play into Town's hands, but certainly we know that Town can beat teams that are below them in the table and struggling in that relegation zone. And I think they have to do that, because we need the conversation to move away from any talk that Town might be getting sucked into a relegation battle themselves. And if they're not beating the teams that are below them and towards the bottom of the table, then that does become an even bigger concern.
Yeah, regardless of tactics, it's got to be, the quality's got to see through tomorrow. And so Phil, again, going back to what Phil was saying earlier on, Town have got a lot of players who have played in the Championship, played in the Premier League and everything, you know what I mean? There's good players who have played a lot of football in the Championship and Premier League. So you'd expect that little bit more, you know what I mean, quality just to see through anything that Wycombe bring tomorrow.
What do you expect from Wycombe, Phil, in terms of the way they set up? Is it very similar at Adams Park to their away games?
Yeah, it tends to be a 4-3-3. They tend to be quite intense, get the ball into the final third quite quickly, either with Akinfenwa or Uchikpiezu as the focal point. And then it's competing for the second balls. I mean, it's not pretty. It's definitely effective. 2 promotions have kind of testified to that. Yeah, and they love a set piece as well. Although in the Championship, the defending has definitely been a couple of notches higher as well. Although if Joe Jacobson is fit, that will really help Wycombe Wanderers, especially if they're getting corners, because he's had some real success with them at this level too. But yeah, I mean, I think morale is low at the moment for Wycombe, which is not something we're used to seeing under Gareth Ainsworth. I think the defeat of Sheffield Wednesday the other night was a low point for the players and the fans as well, because I think a lot of fans have started to throw the towel in now and start to look to next season. I think Gareth's comments afterwards were kind of alluding to that as well. But they know that it's a results business. He's not under any pressure for his job, but I think they're going to come out. There'll be changes, and I think they'll have a real go at Huddersfield. And I mean, because of the vagaries of COVID and BBC reporting restrictions, I actually covered your game away at Watford the other week as well, which kind of gives me a bit of hope for Wycombe, because you kind of had this sort of suicidal ploy of playing out from the back.
That's not true. That's not true. No, don't be taking that. That has never happened once.
the goal that Watford struggled, I thought. I mean, it was a very weakened Huddersfield team, I think, due to injury. And the opening goal was literally just the biggest shooting yourself in the foot I think I've seen this season. And that kind of gives me hope for Wycombe, because they do like to press high and they like to get in the opposition's faces. They've got a young keeper who made a real ricket that night. And I think at the 0-0 at Wycombe, he looked a little nervous with the ball at his feet, but then made some really good saves as well in the second half. So I think Gareth will be aware of that. And I think the high press will come. And if you're not confident, and if Wycombe can edge themselves into the lead, then they will then break the rhythm of the game down and become the most frustrating team you've ever watched.
Like Stephen said, though, you know what I mean, with Wycombe, no disrespect to where they are in the division, but if they don't get that press exactly right, like Sheffield Wednesday did and like QPR did, and I mean, Town do exploit teams like that. Watford, as you alluded to earlier on, have got some players who earn a couple of quid, and you know what I mean, and probably will be in the Premier League again at some point. I just don't feel, you know what I mean, that it'll be the same, obviously, quality coming at them, and probably they'll be organised. We know they'll be organised, but it's just, again, like Stephen said, those lower teams just don't seem to have the same pace in that press, and Town do seem to do a lot better against those sides.
Yeah, I've certainly seen in the Championship, one of the big differences we've seen. I mean, there's several teams in League One who kind of split the centre backs onto the corner of the 6-yard area on when the keeper's got it, which it's sometimes pretty farcical because they just don't have the players to deal with it. And in this season, the Championship, we've seen why that tactic can work when the play can be stretched, and when we're playing teams, you've got the ability and the talent to be able to do that. We've seen that this season. And I get what you're saying about, the press as well. And I think this has been Wycombe's problem. They've had to run so many extra yards than every other team this season. Their possession stats are always really low. And even when they're doing well in League One last season and the season before, they tend to tail off a little bit after Christmas because I think it takes its toll over a season. So that's why I said I think there'll be changes made in terms of personnel, just to kind of get some fresher legs on there to see if they can execute that press correctly.
It's interesting that, Steve, isn't it? Because we spoke about the press and game management a lot on these preview shows and on post-match shows as well. That's going to be the key here, isn't it? The game management from the lads at the back, like Ryan that's been mentioned, Naby Sarr, Richard Keogh, etc. But also when teams have pressed Town, like Matt mentioned there, QPR springs to mind, where we absolutely played some scintillating football when they were pressing us and we could zip the ball through them.
Yeah, going direct against teams that press high works really well, obviously. And I think that was the plan against Luton too, which was, a really energetic game. And I think Town were obviously poor in the first half, did much better at that in the second half. And they actually, in the second half of that game, gave up a lot of possession and a lot of their pass completion to go more direct, and were much better as a result. And we've seen that in a few games this season. So I think there's something to be said sometimes for just playing those straight balls up the middle. But you mentioned game management, and I think it's that has been an issue at times this season. But I think more than that, recently, it's just been making silly errors, and at all different times in the game, and all different types of errors as well. And Town haven't kept a clean sheet since before Christmas. The 2-0 win against Watford was the last time they kept a clean sheet. And it's strange because that was actually at the end of a run of they'd kept 4 in 5 games. We won't mention the other one. And then haven't had one since. So we know that they're capable of doing it. But for some reason, the concentration just doesn't seem to be there. And Carlos Corberán always talks about it's not always just a technical thing. Obviously there's partly that when a player's giving the ball away in their own third, but there's also sometimes positional things at play where perhaps the player doesn't have the best options available to them and end up having to pick a pass that is riskier than it should be because they've not got the options off the ball. So it just feels like there's a lot of fine tuning that needs to be done. I don't think it's rip it up and start again, because as I say, we've seen that these players can do it, but there's just bits of turning that screwdriver that needs to happen.
Which is interesting, Matt, isn't it? Because like we said, on that run that Steve just mentioned, it was 4 clean sheets in 5 games. The home form was magnificent over that period. We were playing pretty much a very similar starting 11 all the way through. And then at the end of that, the injuries hit. I think we've got 10 players still out or unavailable because of different injuries. Then different players have to come in. They have to kind of learn the role. There's so much you can do on the training pitch, isn't there, to learn where you need to be. But in game, it's completely different.
There is. And I'm sure they shadow each other in training anyway. So they'll have an understanding of how they're going to play. Carlos Corberán's not going to change from, training ground, younger players, all the way through. But like Stephen alluded to, it's mistakes, it's individual errors. And that's why, I don't blame Carlos Corberán, I don't blame coaching staff. It's down to the individual, and the individual needs to stop making the errors. Like Naby Sarr, I think Naby Sarr's superb, but he's just got to cut out those errors because, he's got everything. He's got the height, he's got the pace, he's got, positional sense, everything's there. He scores goals. He scores goals, but he give the ball away at the weekend, but then he goes chasing the ball as well. It's like, instead of just, you give it away, right, stand back, I try and control the defence and try and control the situation. You're thinking, no, that's not Carlos Corberán. That's not the rest of the team. That's just an individual error. And that's why I think it's so frustrating, because all the good play and all the great work, and you can see the progression that is coming, It's just that mistake. Keogh after Richard Keogh's done great. You know what I mean? Since he's come back to the club, he gave 2 passes away in the game. One of them ends up with a penalty. You know what I mean? A bit of bad luck in there as well. I know Carlos doesn't like to talk about bad luck. I will, because sometimes you just think, my God, not again. I've given 2 passes away and they've scored. They've scored from one of them. You know what I mean? And that's all anyone's talking about. I did 94 passes and I gave 2 away. And the conceding, obviously, as a goalkeeper, you know, I made numerous saves and allegedly I made 1 or 2 mistakes. Might have been a goal here and there as well. And that's all anyone talks about. And that's what we're doing now. We're talking about that 1 pass, that 2 pass that ends in a goal. Not all the great play. Like the goal against Bristol. What a wonderful goal against Bristol. Finished off by Wakuna in there off the back heel from Mbenza, you know, in Aaron's doing his run. But all we're talking about is the fact that a ball slid from the half well and all the way through, got dummied, ends up in the back of the goal. When we should be talking about an amazing finish. It's crazy, but that's football. And that's why we love talking all this rubbish that we talk.
It's the consistency as well. Like, I think early this season you could accept with certain individuals, particularly like Naby Sarr, he would have sort of 2 or 3 good games and then one where he was sort of off his game and he was making these errors. And I think maybe it's just become a bit too consistent recently, and he'd probably say that himself. So it's just, yeah, it's they don't feel, as you said, Matt, they don't feel like they're a million miles off Town. It's just that they feel like they've got 3 or 4 small problems that are each taking sort of 3% off the team, rather than it being a mad deficiency that they're never going to make up. So, yeah, I mean, it is an important game, this, because I think everyone was frustrated that they've only taken 2 points in the last 2 games, particularly the way that those games went, because Stoke, they should have beaten, and Luton, it wasn't the best performance all in all, certainly not in the first half. So I can understand why people are frustrated, but they have a chance now to turn this from 6 games without a win into 3 games unbeaten, and suddenly things start to look a bit better.
And from Wycombe's perspective, Phil, we need to get that win as soon as possible to try and avoid relegation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the lowest championship points total is 18. Wycombe are on 16 at the moment. So I think, if we're taking it step by step, it'll be nice to get ourselves over that sort of awkward milestone.
Not like the chairman, Phil. That's positiveness as well. There we go. We won't be the lowest point scorers.
Yeah, well, so we'll get that. That would be the first thing. If Wycombe could do that on Saturday, that would be a great start. And then, there's no easy games, obviously, at this level for Wycombe. But yeah, momentum is tough, and they're on a downward spiral at the moment in terms of performance as well, which is the first time that's happened this season. So, but Gareth is he's a great manager, and this is where managers really earn their corn. It's all very well sort of taking the plaudits when you're winning at Wembley and getting through to playoffs and etc. and two promotions. And we got to remember that Gareth nearly took Wycombe out of the Football League and nearly took them out of existence, because that would have driven the club into bankruptcy. He was a width of a crossbar from doing that, and the club couldn't afford to sack him. So they backed him, and we didn't have any money, but they said he can stay, and he kind of redid the squad. He changed everything that he possibly could. And he said, I'm never, ever going to have that feeling ever again. And 2 promotions later, he's really kind of been a real poster boy for giving managers time. And the vast majority of Wycombe fans think, yeah, give him time at this level as well, because it may well be that we have to kind of yo-yo between League One and the Championship, a bit like Rotherham have done. That's not too, they're pretty good divisions for us to yo-yo between, considering Wycombe have only been in the league really since 1993. So yeah, I should also mention that I'm gutted I can't come to the game tomorrow, because I've never been to your stadium, and I know that Wycombe were the first ever team to score there when it opened. So I was hoping I was be able to tick that one off and do a bit of football tourism. But alas, maybe next season or the season after.
Yeah, fingers crossed for you. And on that, obviously, this is only going to be weirdly the 12th meeting between the 2 sides. And Matt, you were on the bench in a really memorable one. I don't know if you can remember, but the 6
Yeah, if I was on the bench, I won't remember it now, because I'll have probably been eating biscuits and just talking to someone else. So, which one is it? Go on, tell me, which one was it?
6-0 over Wycombe, 2009.
2009. Did Jordan score a load of goals? Is that one?
I think he got 2.
2. All right.
I think there was like 5 different scorers. Or
I was a very angry man in that year, so I don't remember very. I remember every single game I played in, apart from the goals I let in. But all the saves I made. But I don't remember sitting on my backside and watching football very much now.
I remember the 6-0s because there were 2 of them, both on Sky. After the first one, Gary Waddock was the Wycombe manager. After the first one, he'd only just taken charge of the club, and he was like, "This will never ever happen again under my watch." And I can't remember, there was about 2 or 3 years between them, and then we played Huddersfield again on Sky and lost 6-0. Jordan Rhodes scored 4 in that second game, and I think there was about something ridiculous like 25 scouts there watching Jordan Rhodes score. And I always said that Wycombe was so bad that day that we deserved a percentage of his sell-on fee because we made Jordan Rhodes look fantastic that night. And lo and behold, who scored against Wycombe the other night? Jordan Rhodes. So, yeah.
It's funny how these things happen in football, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Steve, just finally with you, where do you think the key elements of this game are going to be?
I think obviously covering for Harry Toffolo is going to be a challenge. He's obviously going to be out for the next few games. So that is a challenge to overcome. It'll be interesting to see how Carlos compensates for that. There's also quietly something I noticed sort of overnight last night was Isaac Mbenza has set up 5 goals in his last 8 appearances, which has kind of slipped under the radar. I think probably because Town have been in such poor form. So there's been all this focus on the left-hand side and how Town are too dependent on the left. But actually, they've been creating a lot of the goals off the right-hand side. They've only actually scored. He's set up 5 of the last 9 goals they've scored, and you can add the own goal against Watford to that as well, that they scored in December. So there is, if they can get the best out of Isaac Mbenza, if he keeps his place, then he could be really, really key to Town getting a result here.
There we go. Steve, Phil, Matt, thank you very much for joining us. Town fans, if you're a season card holder, you can watch the game on iFollow HTAFC. If you're not a season card holder, then you can, but you'll have to purchase a match pass for £10. Guys, thank you for joining us, and Town fans, thank you for watching.